A gentleman who I've known for years here at Graceland. For 12 years, he was the staff photographer for EPE, shooting all the events and the concerts, and you've seen him. He's probably ruined many of your photos by walking in front of you down on the edge of the stage. He's back. He's going to talk about some cool things. Robert Dye is here. The photog. You look weird without, like, straps of cameras around you. This is the guy you see down front. He's at everything, so say hello to Robert. You've seen the back of his head. Here you go. Now, you were here to talk about a couple of very special photographers and an era of Elvis that, talking about the movie,
Right.
the Rustwood Park scenes. But there were a few photographers that were very early on part of Elvis's story. And let's hear about them. One of them, Al Wertheimer, and another
Right.
one you knew pretty well.
Right. Al Wertheimer, I worked in licensing here at Graceland, and I managed Al Wertheimer in his collection, which I learned really so much from him. Al was born in Germany. They immigrated to the U.S. in the late 30s to get away from Hitler. He went to design school, became a graphic designer, got a camera later in life, about 1951, 52, got a camera, and started freelancing. He started freelancing in late 1955, and went to RCA and said, "Hey, I'm a pretty good photographer. Put me on your list if you ever need a photographer." So Ann Fulcino, who worked publicity for RCA in late March, needed a photographer to shoot Elvis at the Dorsey Brothers show. Calls the first photographer on the list. Nobody's home, phone doesn't ring. He didn't have his cell phone with him at the time, I guess. So she goes, the next person down was Al Wertheimer. And Al said he just happened to be at the studio that day, just by chance. She said, "I need you to shoot the Dorsey Brothers show." And he said, "I'd love it. I love Tommy Dorsey." And she said, "Actually, it's a guest. It's one of the entertainers on the Dorsey Brothers show, Elvis Presley." Silence. You could hear crickets in the background. And Al goes, Elvis who? Had never heard of Elvis before. So he needed to pay rent, so he said, "Fine, I'll meet you down there." On Saturday, comes down on Saturday. Elvis is talking to a jeweler at the time. I think we can pull up the first slide, maybe. Yeah. He was talking to a jeweler at the time, and said, "This is Al Wertheimer. He's going to photograph you for, some photos for us." He looks up, "Fine, great." Goes back to the jeweler. And like here, you're seeing a lot of the iconic photos that he got. He shot Elvis for about 10 days. And what Al did, one thing that's always stood out with me with Al's photos, he never posed Elvis. He shot like 2,000 photos of Elvis, never posed him. Elvis may have looked up, like the one photo there on the left, and just looked at him, but he never posed him. Before, in the late 40s and early 50s, you had big press cameras. You had to have a big flash. You couldn't be a fly on the wall and take pictures. Well, Nikon came out with a camera called the Nikon S2 in 1954. And then Kodak came out with Tri-X film, which was a black and white film that was very fast and you could shoot in very low light. So the Nikon camera, they said you could shoot in available light. You didn't need flash. And so Al purchased one of those, got the Tri-X film. Where Nikon said you can shoot in available light, what he did was shoot in available darkness. He said you understood the person more the darker it gets. They became themselves. What he loved about Elvis was, he said Elvis invited closeness. Elvis was just himself the whole time.
Well, in looking at these are all different kinds of situations on a train.
Right.
They're on Audubon with the motorcycle, and they're in a television studio. I mean, the kind of thing, and Can we go to the next one?
Yeah.
Just these kind of moments, you know, the one on the left recreated in the movie.
Exactly.
With Austin behind DJ's drums, and then with the Kiss lady.
Yeah, Barbara Gray.
Barbara Gray. If you don't know the story, look this up. We one of the big mysteries of early Elvis years was who was this woman that Elvis was kissing in the stairwell. There's another couple of photos of her. Go back to the kiss. There you go. We never knew who that woman was, and many women came forward and said who they were. And the minute Al found out about it, he would ask them a question, and they didn't have the right. He was like, "So wasn't her." And after years, I don't know how long ago. It seems like 5, but it might have been 17 for all I know. Here at Graceland, we had Al come in, and he brought the woman who was the woman in the photo, Barbara Gray, and she told her story about meeting Elvis that day, and they drove around and they went backstage to this appearance at a theater, and she had been standing on everybody thought she was a tall woman, but she'd been standing on a step kissing Elvis. So that was what Al knew that the person had to know that didn't know if you were not telling the truth about it. So Al was, and again, imagine that. Elvis is, talking to this girl.
He was focused.
He was in the stairwell.
He was focused at what was at hand.
And Al's just kind of clicking away. He was just kind of around clicking away. But here's the other thing about Al, and about photographers in general. You're brave enough to move in, but you can read a person. You know it's okay. You know what? It's okay if I go around to the end of the piano. You know what? He's focused. He doesn't care. And he trusts me by now.
At one point, they were doing a rehearsal for a TV show. They went back to the hotel room. Elvis was reading letters on the couch, and Al was taking pictures. They both fell asleep. And all of a sudden, Al wakes up and he hears this buzzing noise, and he's looking around, and he finds Elvis in the bathroom with an electric razor. And Al said, let's see how close I can get. He goes, Elvis, can I come in the bathroom with you? He's like, yeah, sure, whatever. He gets Elvis shaving, gets Elvis, there's no towels in there. They get pictures of him shaking his hands.
And these next 3 photos, I think this really shows Al's eye as a photographer. It's not just about shooting somebody. I mean, listen, we could have shot Elvis and made it look like this was Elvis. But this is a photographer's eye. I love this.
There was a photographer named Cartier-Bresson from France, and he had it was called the decisive moment, where, like with Elvis, it would be on his toes, screaming in the mic, it would be that moment. Al liked to get the moments before and after. He wanted you to look at his photos, kind of like the next photographer would also, but he wanted you to see what was going on, so he shot all the details. The microphone from the, Hound Dog recording session there, the guitar sitting there, the clothes there. He shot the bedrooms at Audubon.
And next up, we've got, talking in the recording studio, some incredibly iconic shots of Elvis.
Yeah. And this is the Hound Dog Don't Be Cruel recording session. And Al just, got some really good stuff. On the left is when Elvis is hitting the back of the guitar at the beginning of Don't Be Cruel. And what kind of stood out with me with this recording session was he came in to do Hound Dog. He had been doing it on stage. He had been singing it. He had never heard of Don't Be Cruel. They brought some acetates for him to look at, to listen to. RCA said, here's some songs you may like. And, he stopped on Don't Be Cruel. It was a Otis Blackwell recording. He listened to it twice, memorized all the lyrics, went over to the piano player, which has one of the best piano player names. His name was Shorty Long. And went through the arrangement with him, went with Scotty and Bill, did the arrangement. 25 takes later, they had a #1 hit. And the song actually sold 1 million records before it was on the charts.
And that's July 2nd, 1956.
July 2nd of 56. And what kind of impressed Al about this, and if y'all get his books, and we're going to give away one of his books here, is read what Al says about these sessions, because Al said, Elvis took over this session. Steve Scholes with RCA could have sat in the back and not said a word because Elvis was in charge of this session. He had just sung to the Hound Dog a couple of days before, so Elvis was kind of like, okay, I'm going to do what you want me to do here. In the studio, this is me.
There you go, and there he is.
And he would listen to the playbacks. There was 30-something takes, I think, of Hound Dog. Around take 25, RCA said, I think we got it, we're good. Elvis said, no, we're gonna try it again.
And we're going to talk about this session here
Yeah.
coming up, because there's a reason Elvis was so particular with what you'd think would be a simple song, Hound Dog. He had an attitude about that song, and we're going to talk about that coming up.
So when he left the recording session, he said, can I get some acetates of the three? He did 3 songs. Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel in Any Way You Want Me, I believe. And so they cut him acetates, and we can see the next slide here. He takes the train trip back to Memphis. This is July 3rd and 4th on like a 30-hour train ride. Coming back to Memphis, and Al just kind of is walking by Elvis's room and looks over, and Elvis is sitting there listening to the acetates he had just cut over and over, and you can see them on the photo of the right. You can see the acetates there. And Al didn't ask Elvis a whole lot of questions. Every once in a while he would, but he did this time. He said, "Why are you listening to this on such a inexpensive, record player there?" And he said, "Well, this is how my fans are going to listen to it. This is how they're going to hear it. And if it sounds good here, it'll sound good in the studio." And he would listen to it over and over and over.
And again, this is July 2nd was the session.
Yeah.
The 3rd, he's traveling back.
Right.
And this look at this. This is probably July 3rd. Within 24 hours, he goes from this quiet to something very special here in Memphis at Russwood Park.
Yeah. The Russwood Park show, it was a benefit for the Cynthia Milk Fund. The Cynthia Milk Fund, in Memphis we had 2 newspapers. We had the Commercial Appeal was the morning paper, the Pressimeter was the evening paper. The Pressimeter put on a charity event every year, and this was a benefit for the Cynthia Milk Fund. It helped mothers, nutrition and formula for their babies for the low-income areas of Memphis. Started in 1933, and it still is going today. You can go to the website for the LeBonner Children's Hospital, and the Cynthia Milk Fund is still there, and you can still make a donation to that today. So the next slide is when Al gets to Russwood. Al goes to Audubon Drive with Elvis. The police department shows up with a police car, the colonel, Elvis, Al sits in the back seat. They go to Russwood. There was like 70 musical acts that day. It started at 5. Elvis gets there about 9 or 9:30. The colonel on the left goes to business doing what he does. And
Selling the merchandise.
Selling the merchandise. The photo in the middle, photographers sometimes just get lucky sometimes. The same instance that he took the photo, somebody took a photo from the crowd and created the starburst there. And then Al would work his way around the crowd. He had his little 35 millimeter camera, so he could kind of be less obtrusive. We can go to the
And this next one is one of my favorite ones, because Al is now turning the camera away from Elvis toward the fans that are watching Elvis.
And something the next
That girl there in the
photographer-
black is actually she's becoming a woman right there.
And something that the next photographer I'm going to talk about said, and Al said too, is sometimes when you're shooting people on stage, turn around and look at the audience. Sometimes, So Al would turn his camera on the audience.
And this next shot looks like a U2 concert. Look at that.
Colonel Parker had told Al, he said, when we go to Russwood, you're going to see a sea of faces.
Yeah.
And Al said, yeah, he was right. He's getting here the King of the Fan Mail Award. Dewey Phillips was the MC, and if y'all know, Dewey was the first to play That's All Right on the radio, and was a good friend of Elvis.
This is, I mean, this is July 4th, 56. He cut That's All Right Mama July 5th, 54.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
this
not,
is
it's, so the
almost
next
2
day
years.
is 2 years
Yeah,
that all
Yeah.
of this started.
exactly.
That's amazing. It's not even American Idol then.
Well,
And the infamous exit from Russwood Park next.
Right. You kind of saw a little bit of it in the movie. Everyone just surrounds the car. You know, they're trying to get Elvis out. They're trying to get everybody, you know, out of the way. The reason I showed this one, this is a photo that Al Wertheimer took, but it shows the next photographer I'm going to talk about is in the upper right-hand corner. And he's got a big 4x5 press camera, completely different than how Al shot. You had to have the big flash. It could light up the whole auditorium.
Yeah.
And that's my father. Yeah. Yeah, he was there.
So you're a Nepo baby.
Yeah. I get it naturally.
Exactly.
And
Next up.
look at the next slide. Al's collection, when he passed away in 2014, his collection went to he had 2 nieces, and they inherited his collection. They sold it to this company, Moose or Muse. And if anyone would like to purchase Al Wertheimer prints or, you know, inquire about licensing, this would be the company you would talk to. They're doing a real good job as the stewards of his collection. They care just as much about the photographer as they do the images themselves. And the picture on the left is part of a contact sheet, and it kind of shows you how Al photographed Elvis. But the next slide, this is my father's collection. My father had seen Elvis before at some of the small clubs around Memphis, and this was February 6, 1955. It was the first time he photographed Elvis. It was a big show, the Carter family, Farron Young, lots of other people. The middle photo is Elvis and Dewey Phillips singing together. But what's important about this date, this is a very important date, Elvis had a 3 o'clock show and an 8 o'clock show. In between shows, Colonel Parker met with Sam Phillips and Bob Neal, who was Elvis's manager. There were some representatives from RCA there at the time. And they met at Palumbo's restaurant, and Colonel Parker told Sam Phillips, "Your little studio's not big enough to handle Elvis." And that was, you shouldn't say that to Sam Phillips. So it was very contentious. They said Elvis, Scotty, and Bill just slinked off and went into another booth and kind of, you know, let them, you know, hash out. They ended up giving Colonel Parker some time to kind of test Elvis out, take him to Texas, and the rest is history, as we say.
Yeah, next up.
The next slide is this. The middle slide is Overton Park Shell. It was the second time Elvis played the Overton Park Shell. This is August 5th of 55. This is still 55. Elvis in a white lace shirt. And then the ones on the end are September of 56, and that was the last time my father photographed Elvis. Both Al Wertheimer and my father both said the exact same thing. They said after September of 56, as a photographer, you couldn't get close to Elvis anymore. Colonel Parker had, you know, control of everything.
Well, yeah, controlling the image. And I love the photo on the left because it's obvious that your dad has been noticed by Elvis.
Yeah, you don't get the cheese, you know, Elvis, you know, give me a cheese shot.
That's the 56 version of the duck face.
And then the next slide, this is May of 56. In Memphis, we had what was called the Memphis Cotton Carnival. Big midway would be put on Front Street. And so this was the Auditorium North Hall. This is where Elvis graduated high school from, his ceremony. This is where the Blackwood, you know, they had the funeral service for which one of the Blackwells?
It was a Blackwood.
Blackwood.
I'm blanking on whose funeral, but yeah.
And Elvis attended that. Well, for this show, they opened up both sides because it would be like if you had another seats back here, a smaller auditorium, and they would just draw a curtain. Well, they opened up the curtain and Elvis played to the North Hall, and then he turned around and played to the South Hall on the other side.
Wow. On the stage he graduated on.
Yes.
Oh.
And this is Russwood. Like we said, there were like 70 or so acts at Russwood. This is a bop contest they had.
Next up.
Go to the next one. This is Elvis arriving at Russwood. And everyone was polite. I mean, the police officers are like, okay, just stand back a little. I mean, they weren't tearing his clothes off or anything. I always loved this. And this will show you kind of different. My father's camera had the big flash on it. You know, Al, in a way, couldn't have gotten something like this because he's lighting up all the way back to the, you know, the signs back there. Mm-hmm. And then the next shot. When I first saw these, I asked my father, I said, well, how did you get up on stage? And he said, well, there were some little steps over there. And I said, well, yeah, but I mean, you were like right behind Bill Black. And he said, well hell, them, you know, girls would kill you out in the audience. And, you know, they were bumping into you. And he thought, well, that'll be the safe place to be. And if you've got a really good eye, the photo on the right, if you look under Elvis's guitar, that's Gladys, kind of peeking around. Gladys was there, Minnie Mae, Barbara Hearn was there, and they were sitting in kind of the VIP section. You can see Dewey Phillips poking his head up there in the background. And the photographers that night would kind of switch. One would take a couple of photos from a place, then he would move and let the other photographer come in.
The kind of camera, because your dad had a bigger the resolution on the next slide, you can make out individual faces
right.
of the people.
And this shows you how the light was. The flash on there lit up all the way out. You've got Dewey Phillips, the MC there, accompanying Elvis on guitar. The photographer that's out there is Eli Jaffe, and he's got a big 4x5 press camera out there also. His son was Hal Jaffe, who photographed Red West Wedding. Mm-hmm. So if you see there's photos of Elvis in a white tuxedo at a wedding, his son took those photographs.
Yeah, that he was late. He was Red's best man, and he was late. And I asked Red one time, "Did you guys held the wedding up?" He's like, "Yeah." And what's amazing about these photos, and we have one more, just kind of the concluding car exit shot, showing the amount of people that.
The first shot you saw that I showed you that showed my father in the background, this is the shot he took almost at the same time. And for a while I thought, oh, look, there's Al Wertheimer back there but it wasn't. Al had already taken his picture, stepped down, and let another photographer come up. But this shows you kind of after the concert what was going on.
What's interesting about your father's work with Elvis and Al's is these photos were taken, they were used for the purpose that they were just kind of put away.
Exactly. In Al Wertheimer's case, he shot Elvis in '56. Both of them only shot Elvis one more time after Russwood. My father shot September '56 at the fair. Al shot 1958, Elvis leaving New York for the Army. Both photographers put their negatives away, literally filed them away. Al brought his back out 25 years later. My father's negatives were in a separate building on our property. It was a dark room we had there, and he had put a padlock on it about 1958, 59. 1985, we're gonna make it into a greenhouse. Take the padlock off the door, open up the door, there's an enlarger there, there's all these boxes of negatives that said wrestling and Cotton Carnival, and one box said Elvis Presley, 55, 56. They had been sitting there for 35 years, not touched. So I promoted those, got him in Memphis Magazine, got him a little publicity. He passed away with cancer in '94, so I wanted to get him a little recognition. Graceland purchased the negatives in '92. Very, very nice.
So you lived to see his work
Exactly.
become part of it. Oh, that's correct.
And he would do the little fan, he would do the, sell photos at the Fan Fest. And at one of them, Ron Galella took a photo of my father and Sean Schaefer together.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like the first and last photographers who shot Elvis.
Ron Galella was a very famous paparazzi that would be at hotel doors and
Jump out of bushes.
And jump out of bushes. He took photos of Jackie Onassis, and he took a photo one time, a flash photo of Marlon Brando leaving a restaurant.
Yeah.
Brando punched him in the face, broke his nose, and the next night he finds where Brando is, and he's waiting outside for Brando wearing a football helmet. And he's also the photographer that took the shot of Elvis leaving the hotel. Jerry Schilling is there, and Dick Grove and Red, but Elvis is holding a jar of Skippy peanut butter.
That's Ron Galella.
And that's Ron Galella, yeah. And I said, why was Elvis holding a jar of peanut butter? And Red said, because he wanted peanut butter. And you have a present for someone.
We're gonna give away. We've got. And if anyone's flying home and wins this book, I apologize for putting your luggage over the weight limit. This is a book on Al Wertheimer. It's by Teschen, and Hatch Showprints, who's out of Nashville, did all the artwork for this. So they're really nice coffee table books. So we've selected some seat numbers here.
Row Q. Where's row Q? Just raise your hand if you're row Q. All right, Q. 106.
You have a book.
You're the winner. Come on down. You're the next contestant on the buzzer drive. 106. Oh, 107 is going. Oh, I miscalculated. Come down and see Robert.
After the show.
After the show.
We'll take care of it.
And come on down. Get a good look at her.
Okay.
All right.
Gotcha.
All right. Thank you, Robert.
Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
So now you know who he is.